In the context of a dramatically changing situation in the world where wars are fought not only on land but in the depths of the oceans as well, the United States is developing a new generation of nuclear submarines. The Columbia class will be an important link in the U.S. nuclear triad, ensuring the protection of American interests around the world. But how long will these underwater giants remain relevant as guardians of the nuclear balance? Let's find out. There's a concept known as bomber diplomacy, according to which the United States uses its strategic bombers as a broader foreign policy and security tool. Thus, it's become commonplace for many to see Boeing B-52 Stratofortress and Rockwell B-1 Lancer bombers in the skies, often flying alongside Allied fighter jets, thereby sending strategic deterrence signals to both China and North Korea in Asia, along with Russia over in Europe. Such flights are also considered an effective tool for reassuring U.S. allies in both theaters of war. This reassurance, like deterrence, is achieved by increasing the visibility of the bombers. Well, now the Navy has a similar thing going on. Only here the role of diplomats was given to nuclear submarines carrying nuclear ballistic missiles, SSBNs. The emergence of such underwater diplomacy is especially remarkable given that submarines were never intended to be visible. It's not for nothing that these underwater operations have long been called silent service. Thanks to its invisibility, the submarine fleet has high survivability, which gives it a guaranteed possibility of a second strike, also known as a retaliatory strike. But as soon as the submarine becomes visible, opponents quickly recognize its location, which makes the ship vulnerable and undermines its value as a deterrent. However, it seems that the once traditional understanding of this very submarine fleet invisibility is already outdated. The first overt public deployment of SSGNs, nuclear-powered cruise missile submarines, as a diplomatic cudge occurred in 2017 at the height of tensions with the DPRK. It included a visit by the Ohio-class submarine USS Michigan to South Korea. In 2020, one of the Ohio-class SSGNs, USS Georgia, quite noticeably deployed on the surface through the Strait of Hormuz into the Gulf. The idea of visible deterrence was mentioned again in October 2022 Nuclear Posture Review, which discussed work with allies and partners to identify opportunities to increase the visibility of U.S. strategic assets to the Indo-Pacific region as a demonstration of U.S. resolve and commitment, including ballistic missile submarine port visits and strategic bomber missions. When the USS West Virginia, one of the Ohio-class SSBNs, surfaced in the Arabian Sea in October 2022, the U.S. Department of Defense quickly drew public attention to it in its public statements. This was a particularly important development given that nuclear deterrence issues were once again in the spotlight due to the war in Ukraine. So this message was clearly heard in Beijing, Pyongyang, Moscow, and Tehran. Since then, the U.S. Navy has become noticeably more likely to report not only on the deployment of its nuclear submarines, but also on its activities in the Pacific Ocean in general. However, the main dilemma for the U.S. Navy in all this is that its first Ohio-class SSGNs, the USS Ohio and USS Florida, were scheduled to be decommissioned as early as 2026. And although new versions of their latest Virginia-class SSGNs are equipped with additional VLS, vertical launch system tubes, 40 vertical launch tubes versus 154 for Ohio only partially compensates for the deficit. Therefore, there's a need to increase the actual number of offshore platforms equipped with VLS, providing greater flexibility for future deployments. And what more global way to do this than creating a new nuclear submarine? Since 2013, the U.S. Navy has consistently prioritized the Columbia-class submarine program, planning for the construction and procurement of 12 such SSBNs to replace the 14 Ohio-class submarines. Simply put, it would guarantee to continue to be funded even if funds for other existing Navy programs had to be cut. The beginning of the history of the Columbia-class, according to congressional documents, is considered to be an exchange of letters between President George W. Bush and British Prime Minister Tony Blair back in December of 2006 regarding the UK's desire to participate in a program to extend the service life of the Trident II D5 SLBM until the 2040s and have their own next-generation SSBNs with D5 on board. Soon after this, and an estimate of the time required to develop and replace the aging Ohio class, as early as 2007, the Department of Defense kicked off studies on a next-generation sea-based strategic deterrent, SBSD. Until 2016, the Columbia submarine program carried a painfully boring name, Ohio Replacement Program, or Submersible Ship Ballistic Nuclear X, where the X hinted at a new development that had not yet received an official name. But even with the name of the vessel, things turned out to be not so trivial. The fact is that the U.S. Navy already had Columbia SSN 771, the 21st attack submarine of the USS Los Angeles class, commissioned in 1995. But the embarrassment was not even the similarity of names, but the fact that when the boat of the same name of the new Columbia class entered service, the former Columbia SSN 771 would still be in service. However, military high command decided not to reinvent the wheel, calling the future submarine SSBN 826 District of Columbia. Paradoxically, the name of the class was not changed. The design and construction of the most important element of the nuclear triad was entrusted to Electric Boat, a subsidiary of General Dynamics, as well as the only company designer, tanker, and builder of American aircraft carriers, Newport News Shipbuilding. By the way, the very same Electric Boat had at one time built all 18 Ohio-class vessels. They decided to leave the length of the vessel unchanged, the same 560 feet as the Ohio-class submarines, and instead added 1 foot in diameter, amounting to 43 feet. However, they decided not to skimp on displacement, thus having 20,815 tons versus 18,750 tons for Ohio. So Columbia will rightfully take the title of the largest submarines ever built by the United States. But length is not the only thing these two giant Navy vessels have in common. When the first Ohios were in production, the Navy expected to keep them in service for no more than 30 years. However, the reality turned out to be such that in the end, their service life was extended to 42 years, dividing it into two periods, 19 years each, and allocating another 4 years to Engineered Refueling Overhaul, ERO. Once you realize that your submarines can effectively serve for 42 years, it'd be strange to make an even more expensive ship with an operational life of 12 years less. Therefore, like its predecessor, the Columbia class will have to faithfully serve American taxpayers for the same 42 years. Unlike Ohio, which required refueling mid-life, Columbia will be equipped with a life-of-the-ship nuclear fuel core, a nuclear fuel core that's sufficient to power the ship for its entire expected service life, although such a decision won't exactly save the new submarines from the need for major repairs in the middle of their 42-year operational period. Replacing the mechanical propulsion system of its predecessors, Columbia's adopted a quieter electric drive propulsion system using an electric motor to rotate the ship's propeller instead of the gearbox and mechanical drive systems used previously. This solution will greatly reduce the acoustic signature of submarines as well as their life cycle costs. At the same time, the nuclear reactor and steam turbines, which are timeless classics for American submarines, will still be preserved. In such systems, a nuclear reactor heats water into steam, turbines convert the heat of the steam into mechanical energy, and generators convert this mechanical energy into electrical energy for use in engines and other onboard systems. In general, turboelectric drives were successfully used on American battleships and aircraft carriers in the first half of the 20th century, as well as on the small nuclear submarine USS Tolleby in the late 1950s. Clarifying additional information about the design of future Columbias, Naval Sea Systems Command highlighted the following: standard equipment developed for previous submarine designs, Virginia-class SSNs, including jet propulsion, anechoic coating, and a larger aperture bow, LAB, sonar system, sail-mounted dive planes, X-shaped aft control surfaces, hydroplanes. Submarine Warfare Federated Tactical System, SWFTS, is a cluster of systems that combine sonar, optical imaging, weapon control, and other components. The most controversial decision of the new submarine from the point of view of experts was the reduction in the number of 87-inch launch tubes to 16 pieces versus the 20 identical tubes used in the Ohio class. In their view, such a move would create the risk that U.S. strategic nuclear forces may not have sufficient capabilities in the 2030s and beyond to fully fulfill their deterrent role. The Department of Defense currently plans to operate a force of 14 Trident SSBNs in the coming years, each with 20 operational SLBM launchers, for a total of 280. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy will, in the scope of the Columbia-class program, set up a force of 12 submarines with 16 tubes, or 192 in total, which is 31% less than the 280 from the previous submarines. And that's not to mention the fact that we have yet to know how relevant nuclear solutions will be by 2080, when the last Columbia submarine will have to leave service. In response to these concerns, the Navy and other Department of Defense officials have assured us that the decision to design 16 launcher submarines had been carefully analyzed and has sufficient potential not only for its deterrent role in the 2030s, but roles beyond that. Each tube will be armed with the UGM-133 Trident II D5LE missile, and after the fiscal year 2039, it'll be seeing an upgraded modification, the D5LE-2, which the 9th Columbia-class submarine and all its colleagues afterwards will receive from inception. And as self-defense measures, the new submarines will be equipped with fresh Mod 7 Mk-48 torpedoes. Lockheed Martin's been working on their improvements for several years now, including guidance control box, broadband sonar acoustic receiver, and amplifier components. The Common Broadband Advanced Sonar System, CBAS, technology, integrated into the Mk-48, provides the torpedoes with optimized guidance, quieter propulsion, and the ability to operate with increased efficiency in both shallow and deep water. Both the Navy and Lockheed officials have said that the Mod 7 setup reduces vulnerability to enemy countermeasures and allows torpedoes to transmit and receive signals over a wider range of frequencies. Decent characteristics are good, but what about spending? The cost will come out to about $126.4 billion for the program, with the cost of purchasing the first submarine, USS District of Columbia, SSBN 826, being $15.2 billion. Yes, even more than the price of the supercarrier Gerald R. Ford. But this is primarily due to the fact that the cost of purchasing the first vessel of the class is almost always higher than that of subsequent ones, since it includes the lion's share of the cost of detailed design / non-recurring engineering, DD&RE. According to preliminary data, these will amount to about $6.5 billion out of a total amount of $15.2 billion per vessel. But the operation of the submarines will be much more modest, about $119 million per year. Is this a lot for a submarine? Perhaps. But is this enough to preserve world peace? Never. What do you think? Will there be a place for nuclear submarines in the foreseeable future, or will they be replaced by more innovative solutions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell for more content like today's. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.